Hey everybody, today I'm going to work on the next step in making pemmican. Last video I showed you how to render fat. We use bear fat. So here's that bear fat we rendered. Next thing we do is we got some beef. You can use whatever meat you have. Today I'm going to do this in my house. You can do it out in the field or whatever, but I just got some beef from the supermarket. There's probably about 2 pounds of meat here. It's really not going to make that much. Once you dehydrate it, it's going to suck out all the moisture and it's going to be just a little bit, but a little bit of meat left over. But if you want to make a lot, just get yourself a lot of beef. You can use, well, you can use deer, venison, you can use buffalo, you can use whatever kind of meat you have available. I'm going to trim off this fat. You got a little bit of fat on there. And then I'm going to slice this as thin as I possibly can to be able to get it in this dryer and have it dry out pretty fast. Now I'm going to use a food dehydrator. So once I slice that meat up, I'm going to put it on this rack and I'm going to dry it. If you don't have a food dehydrator, you can use your oven. Just set it on the lowest temperature that you possibly can. Put it on the top rack and then open the door up. You don't want to cook that meat, you just want to dry it out as much as possible. Now if you're doing it out in the field, or you can do it over a campfire, again you just cut up your meat into thin slices, build yourself a drying rack to put over top of the fire, and then what you do, the distance above the fire, you want to be able to hold your hand comfortably above the flame that's down below you, and put the meat at that level where you can hold your hand comfortably without burning your hand. Again, you don't want to cook the meat. And then if you have a tarp or some way to cover your drying rack and smoke it, that'll help dry out the meat faster. Smoke will help kill bacteria, and then just a little bit of heat with the smoke rising through it will help dry that meat faster. Spices that you can use on the meat. Salt will help dry it out faster. Garlic helps kill bacteria. Crushed red pepper or regular pepper will help also kill bacteria. Also, pemmican typically has blueberries in it. So rendered fat, the meat, and then some sort of berry. We're going to use blueberries. You can either use frozen berries. If you're using frozen berries, you're going to have to dehydrate them. I find that if you use berries like this and you dehydrate them, they lose a lot of their flavor. You can cheat a little bit and you can go get some already freeze-dried or dehydrated berries. Thrive makes a really good dehydrated fruit. It maintains its flavor. So once you get the beef done, you're going to crush this up. And then, of course, the rendered bear fat. After you're out in the field, again, you can just use whatever berry you have available. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, whatever you got. Okay, well I'm going to go ahead and get cutting up this meat. Again, I'm going to take off the fat and slice this as thin as I possibly can. When I'm done with it, I'll get it on the drying rack. Normally on meat, we like to keep the fat, adds flavor, a little marbling, whatever you want to call it. But when we're making pemmican, our fat and the flavor comes from that rendered fat that we did earlier, and leaving fat on here could slow down the drying process and cause it to go rancid. So taking this off, don't have to be too perfect with it, but that was a pretty big hunk of fat. Get rid of that. Now I'm going to slice that as thin as I possibly can. Alright, here's the meat all cut up. Space it nice and evenly so we can get some good airflow in between. I think I had 2 pounds of meat there. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5 racks of meat on there. Let's see. You can see this thing has a setting 145 degrees to 155 degrees is where we're going to set out for the jerky setting or the meat setting. Well, I'll probably set it to meats. That's the same thing. So we want it to cook really slow and get as much moisture out as possible. So we don't want to cook it. We're just getting rid of the water, the moisture out of it. One of my previous videos, we butchered a goat and showed you how to dry meat over a campfire. So if you want to see how to do that, do a search for my video on that goat. And I'm going to get to seasoning it. I'm going to do really light seasoning on this. Probably just a little bit of salt, maybe some garlic salt, because I really want to be able to taste the berries and the meat when I finish this up. So that's it for now. And when the meat's dry, then I'll show you what the next step is. All right, everyone. I think the jerky's ready. I've dried it in this dryer here for probably about 18 hours. I want to make sure that all the moisture was out of it. I want it completely dry. When I add the fat to it, the rendered bear fat, that's going to moisten it up. But you know, any water in it, any moisture is going to cause it to go rancid, go bad faster. So dry it as much as I possibly can. Let's see. You can see here, I can just break this. It's not chewy or pliable at all. It just pretty much just crumbles apart in my hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this all up, chop it up, pulverize it, and get it as close to a powder as I possibly can. And once that's done, then I'm going to add the crushed up blueberries and the rendered fat to it. If you're doing this in the field, then you can use whatever. Try to chop it with your knife. You could try and pulverize it with a rock, whatever it takes to get this broken down into the finest powder, the finest bits that you can. But I'm going to get working on this stuff and get it broke down, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so here's that powdered meat, basically. I cheated a little bit being in the kitchen. I used a food processor to break this down. Like I said, in the field, it's not going to be nearly that fine. But if you're in the kitchen preparing this ahead of time, this is the way you can do it. I'm going to use Thrive freeze-dried blueberries. I mentioned earlier, you can use any berries you find out in the wild, as long as they're edible, or you can use frozen berries and use a dehydrator to get all the moisture out, but you want these dry. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the meat and powder it and mix it in here. I think what we'll do is try to do there might not be a 1-to-1 ratio, but one cup meat to 1 cup berries to 1 cup rendered bear fat. The beef, if you're drying it out in the woods, it could take anywhere between 1 to 3 days, depending on the humidity in the air. You just want to make sure that's good and dry. But I'm going to break down these blueberries and then go from there. Alrighty, there's the powdered blueberries. They were whole blueberries in here. I'm actually kind of disappointed that this pretty big can only had about that much blueberries in it, about a third of the way full. So, these things are pretty expensive. So, a little disappointed on that. So, I'm just going to do it with what I have here. If I wanted to add more blueberries, obviously I could go harvest some out in the wild. I could add raspberries, blackberries, whatever. Or I can go to the store and buy frozen berries and add them to this. But now I got this. I'm going to go get my rendered bear fat. I'm going to melt it down, and then I'm going to pour it evenly over top of this mixture. I'm going to mix this together first. But all right, going to get the bear fat. Alrighty, here's my bear fat all melted down. I don't know if you can see, but there's no impurities in it. We strained this off when we rendered it down the first time, so it's just all nice, clean, pure oil fat. So and dump that in there, and then we're gonna let it cool. I didn't let this boil. I just let it slowly melt. Got my fat here. Got my son holding the camera. Hopefully I can get him to hold still long enough to go on this. I'm hoping that I won't need to use all this bear fat, and then I can save some for later. But I'm just going to spread this around, saturate everything I got here, let it soak in. I'll do that for now. Let me grab a fork here. I'll work that down in there. Make sure it coats everything nice and evenly. Yeah, it looks like that's going to be enough. I only used probably about half of what the bear fat I rendered and cooked up here, warmed up. So I'm just going to make sure this is good and mixed. I know it looks like sludge right now, but once it hardens, I can pack it up and make little balls with meat with it. I've done this with cranberries before and venison, beef, you know, different meats, different berries. Never done it with bear fat, so the flavor is probably going to be pretty strong. You know, that pungent bear fat flavor, but I'm going to have a lot of calories. This will be a lot of trail food. So that's all saturated. You know, make sure. Found a little extra dry spots, but just making sure all the dry meat and berries is covered in that fat. That's what preserves it. It's going to make it last for quite a long time. So, looks tasty, doesn't it? All right. Well, I'm going to let that cool. And once it cools, then I'm going to divide it up. I'll probably use aluminum foil and pack it in aluminum foil. You could use, put it in some cheesecloth too, whatever you need to do to transport it. But we're done for now. I'm going to put my oil back in there and refreeze it so I can use some more at a later date. But once this is solidified, I'll get back to you. All right, here's the pemmican after everything's hardened up a bit. I mean, it's kind of firm. I put a little bit too much the bear fat in there, so it's a little spongy. The texture, I've eaten some. I'm not too excited about the texture. This is the first time I've used the food processor to get it down that fine. I probably won't ever use that again. You know, chop it up into the small bits, but not like a powder. But this is just fine. The flavor is pretty good. That the bear fat is not too pungent. I mean, I can taste the meat. I can taste the blueberries. But yeah, it's pretty good. You know, lots of calories, a lot of energy in something like this. So I'm going to put it in Ziploc bags so I can store it in the freezer until I'm ready to use. You know, when I go on a hiking trip or whatever, I can just grab a bag full of it and take it with me. But that's it. There's my pemmican that I made it at home in the kitchen. If you have any questions, just comment below. Pretty good.